This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
Next on the 5 o'clock report.
This is a fragile truce. Ceasefires are fragile by nature.
That's generally how these people operate, and they've been doing it for decades.
The joint force remains ready.
My thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families.
Now, let's go to the newsroom.
Dire Strait. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Webster. The 11th hour ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran appears in danger of unraveling almost as quickly as it began. Iran accusing the U.S. of violating multiple terms of the deal. One of those terms, though, was opening the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran has now closed it again in response to Israel attacking Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
This is a fragile truce. Ceasefires are fragile by nature. We've seen this with respect to the 12-day war with Iran and Israel last year. It takes time sometimes for these ceasefires to be fully effectuated.
This warning from Vice President J.D. Vance.
If they're going to lie, if they're going to cheat, if they're going to try to prevent even the fragile truce that we've set up from taking place, then they're not going to be happy.
New York Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer's take.
A 2-week ceasefire, especially one as fragile as this, is not a strategy. It's not a diplomatic solution. It's not a plan. Trump should end the war now. The only viable solution is a lasting diplomatic one.
Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gaub tells Fox News it's possible the entire ceasefire process is just an Iranian stall tactic.
There's going to be a point where that needs to be recognized if that becomes a fact, and we're going to have to probably act again, as much as we don't want to. That's generally how these people operate, and they've been doing it for decades.
Joint Chiefs Chair General Dan Kane says, don't forget, it's a temporary ceasefire.
Let us be clear, a ceasefire is a pause, and the joint force remains ready if ordered or called upon to resume combat operations.
Vice President Vance says Israel may scale back its Lebanon attacks. He'll lead a U.S. negotiating team in opening talks with Iran scheduled for Saturday in Pakistan. Wall Street reacting to the apparent progress in resolving the conflict. The Dow and NASDAQ indices each gaining about 2.8% today, about 2.5% for the S&P. Crude oil prices dropped sharply today by over 15%. However, this war has certainly pumped up gas prices in the U.S. They went up another 5 cents a gallon this week, just as Pennsylvania lawmakers were calling for a freeze on the state's gas tax. Congressional candidate Janelle Stelson.
When you're paying $4 or more to fill up your tank, you feel it.
Pennsylvania's gas tax is 57 cents a gallon. State Senator Lisa Boscola tells WHTM.
Everything's about affordability, right? That's all we hear. If it's really affordability and you know these prices are impacting people's pocketbook, why aren't we doing something about it?
There have been similar calls for a temporary gas tax suspension in New York State. AAA says the average price in New York right now is $4.13 a gallon, $4.20 in Pennsylvania. The Artemis II crew back within Earth's gravitational pull ahead of Friday's planned splashdown. NBC's Tom Costello reports right now the public is getting its first look at some amazing photos of the moon.
From the crystal clear captures of lunar craters to our own home planet setting behind the moon. A jaw-dropping perspective. Perhaps the most stunning, that 53-minute solar eclipse with the sun's corona lighting up the entire outline of the moon.
The crew made history by flying deeper into space than anyone ever has and by being the first to see the entire dark side of the moon. The Orion spacecraft headed back to Earth due to splash down in the Pacific Ocean near San Diego around 2 p.m. our time Friday. A man pleaded guilty to murdering 7 women in New York dating back to the early 1990s. Rex Heuermann, also known as the accused Gilgo Beach murderer, in court today on Long Island, where he pleaded guilty to 7 counts of murder and admitted publicly as part of a plea deal to killing an 8th victim. Heuermann's ex-wife says she had no knowledge of the killings.
My thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families.
Prosecutors say Heuermann is expected to get 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Chalk up one for House Republicans after Republican Mark Fuller came out on top in a Georgia special election last night.
The Democrat Party poured millions of dollars into this campaign, poured lies into this campaign, but they can't beat Donald Trump, and they never will.
However, the increase in the slim GOP House majority will likely be short-lived, offset by the expected outcome of a New Jersey special election next week. Some health news. Playing school sports. The apparently pays off in the classroom as well.
Student athletes are a third less likely to be chronically absent from school even in the off-season. That's according to new research from the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative-leaning think tank. There's an emerging consensus that connections to activities, teachers, and peers are critical to combating the nation's school absenteeism crisis.
CBS's Jim Krasula. Still to come here on the 5 o'clock report, a recap of our top regional stories and highlights from today's Inside Out. Checking the stories making news where you live across New York and Pennsylvania, a boil water advisory remains in place for about 11,000 people in the Erie County, New York town of Elma. On Tuesday morning, a water main break cut off service to 3/4 of the town, also impacted neighboring Orchard Park and Aurora. Nate Sobczak says the disruption is more than an inconvenience.
At home, I realized there's no water pressure in the kitchen sink, and then I'm like, oh, this probably wrong. Then I went and saw the bathroom sink was the same thing. I'm like, all right, we have no water pressure.
The break happened at the city's main water plant. 4 water distribution sites have been set up to help out. Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes won't seek re-election after representing Buffalo's 141st district since 2003. Since 2018, she's been the Assembly Majority Leader. At an afternoon news conference, she announced she'll be stepping away, undergoing an unspecified medical procedure next week, though she does plan to finish out her term in Albany after recuperating.
Sometimes we plan and God plans. And I personally know that God specializes in planning. I know that, I understand it, and I'm okay with it.
The Erie County Democratic Committee has begun the process of choosing a replacement candidate. Several local leaders have already been suggested as possible successors. Pennsylvania Supreme Court rejecting a bid to keep Penn State's trustee records hidden from the public in a legal setback for PA's largest university. Here's more from Family Life Sarah Harnish.
The state's highest court has denied Penn State's request to overturn a ruling that will give the news site Spotlight PA and the public access to long sought-after trustee documents. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court denied the appeal Tuesday and ordered the college to turn over documents related to a private trustee's retreat in 2022. Cornell Law School's Heather Murray issued a statement saying, quote, "We're glad to see the Spotlight PA and the public's right to access public records has been vindicated." Sarah Harnish, Family Life News.
Thank you, Sarah. It's an old joke in our area, but one that rings true. There are 2 seasons, winter and construction season. The orange barrels are starting to sprout again on New York and Pennsylvania roadways. PennDOT held a news conference in Dunmore on Tuesday.
67 new projects, estimated at over $655 million.
Jonathan Ebola with PennDOT District 4 laying out what you'll see as you navigate PA roads this summer.
80 miles of roadway improvements, 200 bridges being addressed, 430 miles of seal coat, 1,300 lane miles of crack sealing, and 1,300 lane miles of shoulder cutting.
Quite a to-do list. One of the larger projects will be the reconstruction of Route 219 along I-81, a popular rest area in Susquehanna County. And another meteor fireball sighting. This one, centered over New Jersey, was visible over parts of eastern New York and Pennsylvania around 2:30 yesterday afternoon. If it seems like there have been many such reports lately, you're not wrong. A member of the American Meteor Society says it's not so much that more meteors are hitting Earth, but that more large space debris is impacting our atmosphere. The bigger the rock, the brighter, and also the slower it hits the atmosphere, the longer it lasts, visible over a wider area, producing sonic booms, and more likely some of it makes it to the ground as meteorites. And that, he says, is a function of where the recent meteors are coming from. A region known as the Anthelion source, a region of the sky directly opposite the sun. There's even more science to it than that, but you're on your own there. Up next, highlights from today's Inside Out feature, as our Martha Minikas Foster speaks with Sarah Ekoff-Zylstra, senior writer and faith and work editor for the Gospel Coalition, about her recent article on how to raise pro-life kids in 2026.
Sarah, how would you say that pro-life people can live out within our families what we believe about the value of life?
I was talking with Herbie Newell, who's at Lifeline Children's Services. It's a giant adoption agency, and he just is loaded with good ideas. And he said, one of the first things that you can do is to celebrate birthdays really well. This is such an easy one. He's like, man, if you just celebrate birthdays with your kids, right, you pull out the pictures of them, you pull out the pictures of mom when she was pregnant with you, you retell, like what it was like when you first found out you were pregnant, and you retell what it was like to hear their heartbeat for the first time and tell their birth story again, right? And just are celebrating the joy of that for each person in your family. That's an easy one. Even celebrating each other's lives and each other's genders, because wrapped up all in this is God's good design for sexuality, right? So
sure.
These are the things that we're celebrating about dad, and the things that we celebrate about mom, and the things that we're celebrating about your brothers and your sisters, and what's different and what's the same, and what we really appreciate about each other. I mean, that's just general life conversation. Another thing that he said is to rub shoulders with people who aren't like you. And you can do this by volunteering at a pregnancy center. Even if your kids are in public schools, they're doing this already. Although I'm also going to say, if your kids watch movies or have ever seen a TV show, it's the same thing, like when you're exposing them to people who are making different choices. And not just exposing them, but this is crucial, talking about it along the way. Like, hey, what did you notice about that show? Or like, here's what I noticed. Did you see how this part of how they were living wasn't in line with God's design? What do you think about that? What should they have done instead? You don't have to be like a theological genius, but you just have to be like, hey, here's what I'm noticing. Here's what bugged me about that. And just make that kind of a running conversation. This does require you to know what your children are watching, which I also recommend.
Yes.
Just talking along the way. Another thing I would throw in here, I'm going to say especially for boys, but I don't even know if that's true anymore, boys and girls, to fence them off from pornography as much as humanly possible. That is definitely a way that cheapens our sexuality and introduces you to all kinds of harmful attitudes about this and not the lifestyle that you want for your boys or your girls. And so putting as many passwords on their things as possible, opening up, talking, having those conversations with them, making sure they have maybe their youth pastor or other Christian men or women who are speaking into their lives on these things. Pornography is hunting your children. It is an extremely lucrative industry. The earlier they can get eyes, the deeper the addiction will be. And so they're hunting for children. Accountability, Herbie says to me, accountability is the friend of integrity, right? And so the more accountability you can put in, even in mom and dad's life, right? This is just a lifestyle. We don't live in secret. Is the better off that you can do.
And the connection here with valuing life, the first thing that comes to my mind is the way that life is cheapened for the person who's actually in the pornography, but also the way that relationships are cheapened too. Is that what I'm hearing? Yes. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Like you're just moving away from a biblical view of sexuality and the family and a man and a woman, right? Like you're wrecking all of that.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So all of those things, once your kids get old enough to date, of course, you can have all kinds of good conversations with them around that.
Yes.
More accountability is the friend of integrity there in those relationships, helping them think a little bit, of course, age appropriately, all of these things age appropriately. You know, hey, what are you thinking about in terms of what are some characteristics that we would like to see in your spouse? Should we be praying together for your future spouse, especially if they're reaching a dating age or are interested in somebody? You can open that up. And I would say this, like, here's kind of my closing one. I was like, man, it's so important to have a family where there's a mom and a dad and they're loving these kids and setting an example of what this looks like. And he said to me, Sarah, but even if you don't, he said, my wife grew up in a family where her parents got divorced and it was hard and it was ugly. And easily she could have been somebody who didn't like men or who didn't ever want to get married. He said, but her mom loved the Lord so much. And that even when things were hard and they were crying, right, she still set such an example of someone who was walking with the Lord, who was submitting all things to him, who was delighting in him even, right, who was connected with the church family.
Highlights from today's Inside Out feature with Martha Manikas Foster. You can hear the entire feature and all of our Family Life original news features at Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, and FamilyLife.org. This is the 5 o'clock report on Family Life.
Many people think generosity has to be big to make a difference, but often its real power is found in consistency. Hi, I'm Rob West with the Faith and Finance Minute. The late James Harrison of Australia was known as the man with the golden arm. For more than 60 years, he donated blood and plasma every 2 weeks, over 1,100 times, never missing an appointment and expecting nothing in return. Doctors estimate his faithful giving helped save the lives of 2.4 million babies. That's the power of steady generosity. In other words, we don't have to wait for the perfect time or a large amount. Small acts of generosity, practiced faithfully over time, can bless more lives than we can ever imagine. We can help you learn to manage your money according to biblical principles when you download the free FaithFi app. You'll find it on our website at faithfi.com.
Thank you, Rob. Finally at 5, the big attraction in the Big Apple right now isn't big at all. In fact, he's quite small, has feathers, and does a bobbing dance.
A little walk where he does his head nod.
It sticks out. It's like it's not a pigeon. It's like people wondering, what is that thing?
What is that? It lives up to the hype.
We all love the bird.
The bird is an American woodcock, which has taken up temporary residence in Manhattan's Bryant Park, where he's drawing big crowds every day, though this bird watcher tells WABC he's in the middle of migrating and won't be hanging around much longer.
If they make it to a green space, they're very lucky, because these little guys will land anywhere. And then they hang out for a little while and eat worms for a few days and fuel up, and then hopefully they can get out of this maze of glass and all this and make it upstate.
We hope he does. We'd like to think he'll be happier up here than down there. And that's the world we live in for Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Mark Webster, Family Life News.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.